taking a critical look at the gaming news of the week. This is Augmented Reality, presented by the Triple S League.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Augmented Reality Podcast for May the 6th, 2020. This is your source for news, leaks, and insights about games and the gaming industry. Welcome today. Ash and Cyb here with you as always to give our thoughts, insights, talk about what's big in gaming news, and some other related stories. So if you're listening live today, please do say hello in the live chat. Send us your questions and comments there as well. We will read and respond to as many as we can throughout the podcast. And don't forget to slam that like button. It likes it rough. And it tells us and YouTube that you appreciate this content. And if you're listening after the fact on one of the audio-only platforms, hey, you're missing out on all the fun. Get over here to YouTube, listen live, talk with people in the chat. But if you do like to listen on those audio-only platforms, it does take us a little bit of time to get the podcast up to the audio platforms. I think I'm a couple weeks behind at this point just because of everything else that's been going on. But anyway, lots going on here at the Triple S League YouTube channel and on the Discord server. Check it out. Lots of fun stuff happening there. How are you today, Cyberpunk?
Yeah, it's been a lot. Yesterday's been really
so okay. There's
it's
a
better
news.
today. It's better today because there's lots of good news coming out today.
Yeah.
There's lots of really cool things happening today, and we've got some word and plus positives on a lot of stuff. So that's always great. But yesterday I had the news
You were livid with this story out of Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada.
Yeah.
I
was livid. I was seeing red for a little bit because this is and I'll get into why later.
Yeah, we'll get into the nitty gritty of that. But yeah, there's a story out of the town of Lethbridge, Alberta, where there was a takedown of a dangerous minion of the Empire, patrolling in a parking lot or whatever. Anyway, it was an employee of a. Okay, what is this place exactly? A restaurant of some kind?
It's a Star Wars themed restaurant. I think I've actually stopped there before.
Yeah.
I used to drive through that area a fair bit. It's kind of like a main gateway into the States from central Canada, and it's on one of the major highways that move through the area. So there's a lot of travel and whatnot on it. It's not major. It's not like a major thoroughfare. This city has less than 100,000 people. It sits at 92,000 or something like that. It has a grand total of less than 40 places to eat at in the entirety of the city. You have less than 40 options as far as fast food, restaurants, takeout, bars, and everything else.
Yeah,
it is literally a very small town.
Yeah,
and it's a rural town, and rural living is quite a bit different than big city than city living normally. I mean, big city living, it's obviously very different. I mean, this is a place where people still drive their quads through parts of the town. Not necessarily down Main Street, but they do. It's not uncommon to see horses or quads in the wintertime, snowmobiles going up and down various parts of the city. It's a really I mean, it's kind of a weird word, but it is it and many other towns in the Great Prairies, and then going out to the West Coast, not so much down south, but up in the northern parts of British Columbia, the Yukon, obviously Northwest Territories. These are frontier places, and many of these towns didn't exist 100 years ago. Many of these cities didn't exist 100 years ago, and 200 years before that, there was a handful of encampments or small, very small, very, very small rustic town, and 300 years before that, it was nomad territory where groups of natives would pass through on seasonal hunts and stuff like that. None of this, there's no these aren't ancient old cities at all. It's like these are new places and frontier living. Frontier living, and why I mention this is it's different than it's really different than most anything else you will ever experience. Frontier living is, I think we've mentioned this before. We live near an area where it's like we can drive to, we drive an hour and get to a place where, no man has built a house, no woman has built a house, I'm not being sexist, but, no human being has built a dwelling ever, as far as we know. And there's big swaths of land where there's like where it's just been wild forever. I've talked about how I've had a fair number of encounters with everything from wolf pack, coyote packs to bears and even a lion, not a lion, sorry, a cougar. We call it cougars.
I was gonna say lion. Give me a break. Now you're stretching. Sorry about
Lion,
extended.
I was gonna say panther, but that was not the correct word, and then I defaulted to the next one on the top of the list, and it was like, oh no, lion. No, cougars, mountain mountain lions.
Yeah.
They're routinely called mountain lions out here, and we do have some out here. I grew up in a place where that was a concern. Was bears and mountain lions. It's like you got to be careful about bears and mountain lions because they will eat you given the opportunity. So, and this I mean, it's not, again, this isn't like, it's not living on the edge, but it's about as far from, civilization as you can get in the North American continent without going, either to the Arctic or yeah, I guess the Arctic would be the next thing on the list. So again, I understand it's different and it's a little unique, it's a little bizarre, and sometimes people are like, oh, is it really that, whatever. And I mean, the answer is yeah, for the most part. So
yes, this was a bit of a run-on intro to this story.
Yeah,
I had to run and
I
had to run and take care of something. I told Cy to just keep blabbing. So
I'm trying to set the kind of the feeling for people who don't understand this. So when you hear about police situation in these areas, you're not dealing with the typical police that most people think of. You're not dealing with big city cops. You're not dealing with big city problems. You're not dealing with gangs running up and down. You're not dealing with murders like every there's at least one murder every week. We're not doing that. That's not what this is. Are there murders? Yeah, there's a handful of them that happen every year. It's like a handful. Sometimes there's less than 5. Sometimes there's less than 3 in a city this big, and sometimes there's none. So this is the kind of city that you're dealing with. This is the kind of place that you're dealing with. This is not a big crime, crazy place, crazy area. This is really just a place where people are pretty much people.
And I'm just gonna cut in here because this is going way too far off into the reeds. But
I know. So okay. So I am very much incensed by this because
we need to explain what happened. There's people in the chat asking what's going on, and no, it was not a shooter.
We're getting to that because again, I want to lay this out without getting overly angry at this and letting people know exactly where I stand. So I have 3 relatives, very close relatives, that have been cops under the same judicial system as what has gone on here. And to say that one of them who has passed away is rolling in his grave is not an understatement. This is absolutely disgusting. So there is, now that I've kind of set this up, small town, rural life, very small police department, very small just city in general. Less than 40 restaurants in this city. Again, this is important. There's a restaurant in the city that is called the Galactic. Where is it here? It's called the Cocoa Vanilla Galactic Cantina. Cocoa Vanilla Galactic Cantina. They are a small restaurant that mostly deals in takeout, and there's some dine in there. They have pizzas, they have games, they have Funko, and they have some other stuff. That's them. That's what they do. It's a small little, cute little restaurant thing that does pizza and takeout and stuff like that. And they are Star Wars themed. They have officially licensed Marvel, Disney, and Star Wars stuff. They try to kind of create a little bit of a like cantina vibe in there. It's a really interesting, nifty little place. And Star Wars is clearly labeled on the building. Clearly labeled on the building. Now, I bring this up because if you're living in the city and you're driving around looking for food, chances are, especially if you're, working on shift work, like cops do, I guarantee you are very aware of every restaurant in a city this size. There's less than 40 of them. And 5 of those are Tim Hortons, and 4 of those are McDonald's. So you take those off the top, you've got less than 30 places to go grab a bite at that is not McDonald's or Tim Hortons. Okay? So this is small, very small. This place would be well known. There's a Star Wars character standing outside the place waving at traffic. And there was a complaint called, probably because people are crazy and either are trolls or are freaking out because of some stuff that's been happening recently. And for whatever reason, the cops decide to, they call the cops, and the cops are now forced to show up and investigate whether this weapons complaint is a real weapons complaint or not. Now, again, most people don't know. And I understand this. Most people don't know the police code training, that kind of stuff off the top of their head. I do. And I know that the primary reason why you don't have cops routinely killing children with plastic weapons is because they are trained extensively on how to identify a fake plastic weapon in the hands of a child. Otherwise, and this has happened before in the past, there would be a lot of accidental shootings or shootings just in general of children being the targets because they happen to be holding onto a plastic toy. 5-year-olds take their toy guns and aim them at people all the time. I don't know if you know this, but this is a routine behavior for children.
I'm sorry, dude. I gotta cut in here because this is taking way too long. So there was a girl who works for this restaurant dressed up as a stormtrooper in the parking lot as like a promotional stunt for the restaurant. The cops. Somebody called in a weapons complaint. She was holding like a toy stormtrooper blaster. Somebody called the cops, reported a weapons complaint, and they showed up, kind of did a SWAT thing and handcuffed her, took her down, handcuffed her, and they wound up letting her go. She wasn't like arrested, like she was arrested, but not like hauled off to jail. They uncuffed her eventually and let her go. It was a girl, yes, and it was
5'1" girl. We don't know the details, but
she was somewhere around like 17 to 19 years old. So it was massive overkill. Like there's no question about that. It's kind of like, what are you doing?
I mean, again, that's the general reaction is like, wait, why would you do this? But for me, knowing like in these situations, the police, when they're called to a gun complaint and they show up on the scene, as soon as they identify that it's a plastic weapon and that the person is underage, they are in no way, shape, or form supposed to tackle, push the person onto the ground, and cuff them. That is not something that is standard issue. They can certainly do that if they feel that the person is aggressive or is a threat or to themselves or somebody else. They can certainly do that, but it is against the code. It is against the rule book. Again, now this isn't the Royal Mounted Police, the guys in red that most people think of when they think of Canada. They look at somebody who's short, small, looks pretty young, plastic weapon. They are not supposed. The only thing, the standard thing to do is is to talk to them. It is not to push them onto the ground and cuff them. That is a massive overreach. And like I said, my grandfather's rolling in his grave.
Yeah,
because this is. I have lived in places where children were shot because they had a toy gun. There was a very big case that I happened to be pretty close to way back in the 90s, early 90s, I want to say. And that was in the States. And the officers dumped like 40 some odd clips into the generalized area. And that was, international news. That how could they do this, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of rules that have changed since then. And one of the primary things is if you see a child or somebody who looks like a child and they're brandishing what you can identify as a plastic weapon, you immediately holster your weapon. These guys drew a shotgun on her. They drew a shotgun on her, which is insane. And then the following up reaction, which we're not going to get into, was equally as insane. There's some videos out there. Again, I understand that not everybody understands or knows like protocol when it comes to this stuff. I do. In the last 12 months, I dealt with the police, I'm probably going to say 4 times in work-related stuff. So, where I was either consulting or being consulted or directly communicating with police officers on some way, shape, or form. I understand what goes on. I'm not an expert, but I understand what is going on. More than the average, Joe. And I'm not bragging. I'm just stating that. So when I look at this situation, I see bad. Everything bad. I was incensed. I was infuriated because this is stuff that you get in like, corrupt. This is a symptom. This is an iceberg. That tip of the iceberg. This is a tip of the iceberg thing that shows up in police departments that have either lost their way or are totally or corrupted or running a police state or something. It's a tip of the iceberg thing, and this isn't the first time this particular division, the same cops. In fact, it's rumored right now that it's the same cop, one of them that were involved in this incident on the May the 4th, was the person who a year ago executed a deer by running his vehicle over the deer several times. That's right, several times. Means that there's video footage of this. He runs up, drives over the deer, backs up, backs over the deer, runs up, drives over the deer again, backs up, backs over the deer again. I don't know who's running this department down there. Actually, I do know. I know exactly who's running the department. And I have to say, again, I'm disgusted. And, this is just...
Right.
It angers me greatly.
So anyway, the police department there is... they're launching an investigation into what happened with these officers. Just want to clarify some things from the chat. Her age, we're not 100% sure. Sounds like somewhere around between 17 to 19. And then they didn't tackle her per se, but they made her get down on the ground, and then get down on her knees, and then it looks like they did the takedown thing where they, push you down and cuff her. Unfortunately, there's a video circulating about this event, and it like cuts away, like the guy pans the camera away at certain key moments, which is really frustrating. Like, I don't think he did that on purpose, but anyway. Yeah, it's a stupid situation, and hopefully, like, I don't know if this girl's entitled to a lawsuit or what's going to happen, but it's a nasty situation that she's just doing her job, and then this happens, and her boss was there and was like trying to be supportive and was like, "What are you guys doing? This is, she's just in a costume. It's a plastic gun." People were yelling like, "Are you guys crazy?"
Yeah.
Like it is pretty crazy. It's insane. Like that this actually happened. This should never have happened.
Yeah, and again, I have personal interest in this, and it makes everybody look bad. It makes everything look just terrible. Like this hurts the reputation of honest, fine, upstanding officers who do put their life on the line every day. I've been to police funerals in this area. There was several that happened a few years ago. It was really rough. Family knew the family and all that kind of stuff. It's brutal when this stuff happens, but it's more brutal when this happens because the reputation that you spend trying to build that up for so long, trying to encourage people to like rely on the police officers in an area, is suddenly trashed and thrown into the gutter because somebody doesn't know how to identify a plastic weapon at a distance and learn and know when to holster their weapon. And again, I know it's really technical. There's a lot of depth here. I don't expect everybody to get it, but I'm telling you, as somebody who has family that has a lot of experience on this stuff, immediately it's like, wow, that is terrible, and it's worse than you know, because again, this isn't some big city. If this happened in a big city and there were lots of people panicking, I could understand that. This is a small town in which these officers have driven past this restaurant probably once every 2-3 days at the bare minimum for the last several years, and the fact that they didn't know what Star Wars was is not an excuse. It's not an excuse. You actually literally cannot use that as an excuse in a legal way by denying knowledge of a generalized pulp culture thing. It's like that's not an actual defense for something. It doesn't fly. It doesn't work. It only works in corrupt areas where they're like, well, I thought the guy drew a gun. No, sir, that was a cell phone, and he was talking into it. Well, I thought it was a gun. That only flies in places where it is legitimately corrupt, and this is not okay.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I needed to get this off my chest because I was livid yesterday seeing this going on, and then hearing because I'm like, it rings a bell for me, and I was like, wait, wasn't these the same guys who killed a deer in the middle of the town just cuz? Which again, to me, there was this big investigation with that, and lo and behold, the local police department decided after a big investigation that they did nothing wrong. It's like amazing, amazing. They investigated themselves and discovered that they did nothing wrong. Great. No, I don't think Canada is corrupt in general. I think this particular police department has some bad apples.
Oh yeah,
I don't think they're corrupt. I don't think they're
like,
corrupt. I think they're just not really built for this job.
I mean, the Canadian government is as corrupt as any government. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah.
Like, don't be fooled by the polite veneer and good helpfulness of your average Canadian. Our politicians are definitely corrupt as a rule. As it's just kind of what politics does to people. But like, as we're talking about police officers, my experience with police has always universally 100% every time I've encountered police for any reason in doing their job has been positive. And they visited my house about 3 times within a span of a couple of months about 5 years ago. Because there was some stuff going on. I actually got swatted, and it had nothing to do with YouTube. It was some completely other situation. Mm-hmm. Someone called in a report that a gun had been fired in my house, and turns out the call came from like 2 towns away. So there was no way that they knew it was a hoax. But the officers showed up, and it was ultimately very positive. I was shaken up, and my kids were there, and it was like, what the hell's going on? But the police in general that I've encountered, it's always been a very positive experience. So I think that this is a rare exception. These if you have these ones that are either power hungry or don't know how to do their job properly or whatever.
Well, it's this weird dichotomy, and I mean, again, I'll try and keep this brief, but it's a weird dichotomy where when you have a city that's between like 50,000 and 300,000 people, your you are dealing with some crazy stuff that happens from time to time, murders, kidnappings, that kind of stuff. That stuff happens whenever you get above like 50,000. I mean, it really does, and unfortunately, it does. And there's been some pretty bad events that have happened around that part of that particular province. There's some really crazy stuff that's happened over the years, but you're dealing with that, and like, oh, Joe's, old man Joe down the street's lost his cattle have gotten out of his fence again, and they've wandered onto the highway. It's like you're dealing with that kind of stuff, and then every once in a while you're dealing with a murder. Every once in a while you're dealing with a murder, and some people don't know how to like filter that stuff in their head. And I mean, with all the craziness going on, stress increases, and then they end up overreacting on stuff. That's normal. So either these people need a good long vacation, or they just need to move to either a much bigger town or a much smaller town. But whatever is currently going on there is again, to me, absolutely. There's more details on this that I'm not going to get into. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that happened in tie-in for this stuff that is probably goes over the head of most people. Most people will find it pretty boring. So anyways, that's the story.
Yeah. And who would call it in? I don't know. Who it could be a troll. It could have been
probably
could have been somebody. This could have been like a swatting like incident.
Yeah,
anyway,
I pitched an idea. Do you remember this idea? I pitched this concept. I don't know if I did this with you or the
on Discord the other day.
You know who? No. This was like years ago when we first started the channel. I wanted to do a skit about a kid showing up in school with a Stormtrooper mask, and somebody going crazy because they see the Stormtrooper mask, and they like start like, running people over, trying to get out of the building, and like pull a fire alarm, start a fire, then and just doing all this crazy stuff because they saw a Stormtrooper, and they it's just like suddenly the flashback to Vietnam thing starts happening, and they just run out, and they're just running over small children, and ultimately I decided that would be really difficult to film. But the same concept is like, oh, now that's real. Now we're in reality.
We're moving on now. So on to gaming related news. So Cyberpunk 2077. There's some interesting things going on, including we've gotten back the rating summary from the ESRB, and we've been talking about the various ratings that the game is going to have in places around the world. We've seen Brazil's rating for it. We've seen Australia's. And now we have the ESRBs. So that's for America. And they went into a lot of detail, and it gives us some interesting insights into the game. So we're going to talk about that. Also got some updates on the Sony situation, and also what was the other thing? The Doom soundtrack situation. But Cyberpunk first. So, ESRB rating guide for Cyberpunk 2077 reads as follows. So, the rating summary says, this is a first-person RPG in which players assume the role of a mercenary named V, trying to make their way through the open world of Night City. Players can explore futuristic locations, interact with citizens, perform missions, and engage in combat to complete various objectives within a storyline. So we knew basically all of that already. Characters use handguns, machine guns, rifles, and explosives during frenetic firefights. They go on to talk about the enhanced limbs. They talk about how there's dismemberment. There's combat is frenetic, frequent gunfire, some gore effects, and occasionally, exposed inner parts of a human being. So they're not holding back on like the blood and gore kind of aspect of it, which is not a surprise. I mean, we saw that in you have some pretty graphic kills in The Witcher 3. So it says during one quest, players assist a character by hammering nails through his hands and feet. Yeah. Screaming sounds and blood effects accompany the scene. I don't know what the context of that is, but that's pretty weird.
It's probably one of the more severe things that you can do to somebody on a particular mission. I'm guessing.
But they say they
We
assist.
we should quantify.
They say they assist a character by
Yeah.
by.
It might
I
be
don't
weird
get that.
wording. It might. I know. Because there's some weird wording in some of the intron course that happen later on in that article that you're
That's
reading.
just not a word.
I know, but we talked about this. We're trying to come up with new words. I think people understand what I say when I say intron courses. So there's a bunch of situations where they describe, and there's a lot of reacted stuff. Very, very, very light spoilers on this stuff, guys. Just so you know, there's some very, very light spoilers here. There are no names of characters or particular situations outlined directly, aside from this one. This is probably the worst one. So just a heads up for that. Very, very, very light spoilers, but akin to, you can shoot people, and you can have intron course with various other working.
We need a better word than
lads
that,
and
man.
ladies.
Anyway.
So just putting that out there. Probably should mention that before you read a plot outline for one quest. But sure,
That's not that is not a
some people would
spoiler.
argue. I know some people would argue. I'm just saying. So it is kind of weird. And again, as this is probably very optional. I don't think you're going to be forced into this. I think this is just one of these many quests that you will have an option to do this.
Well, yeah, and the thing with this sort of rating summary, they are, like they're listing the worst of the worst things that made them give this particular rating, which is M for mature, basically 17 plus, for blood and gore, intense violence, nudity, strong language, strong sexual content, and use of drugs and alcohol. Now, there's something else very interesting attached to this. It says in-game purchases. And we'll talk about that in a sec, but just to kind of mention that's also listed, and which is kind of a surprise. So, all right, as far as the sexual content, of course, we've talked many times about what we know the sort of romance scenes, we'll call them, are going to entail. They're going to be in first person, animated, and whatnot. But according to this, like, we didn't know how graphic or intense these are going to get. According to this, you have the option to engage in these activities with other main characters or prostitutes, and the scenes are brief. And
you can't say the P word.
Well, they depict partially nude characters, basically doing stuff.
No.
Basically,
you can't say the pro word. You can't say that.
I know.
They're
I'm not
working
just
fellows.
Just leave that for now. So, basically, what it sounds like is that these scenes are going to be about at the same level that they were in The Witcher 3, except that they're from a first-person perspective instead of third-person. But about that level of graphicness and detail and adultness, if that makes sense. So that's how it reads to me, anyway.
I don't think that they've necessarily. I don't think that they necessarily have an interactive clam or an interactive eggplant. I'm pretty sure that. Well, I mean, they might. We don't know, but I'm hedging on the bet that they're fairly static. That they're not exactly super interactive.
If if they were, what you're talking about, like if it was full on interactive simulation of an actual intimate experience, this would be related. This would be rated AO, and
Probably.
like they would list that here, but there's no mention of that. There's
Time means freaking out about my interactive clam. Or eggplant. I don't know why you keep referring to this. Or eggplant. Option to hold the eggs as far as that goes. The tomatoes. I guess, yeah, tomatoes probably be the better.
The second this podcast is done, we're running a defrag on your hard drive.
Yeah.
My head's about to explode. All right, so that's basically Witcher 3 style scenes in first person is what it sounds like at this point. All right, but when it comes to character customization, whoa. I joked about how last week I can't remember if it was Saturday or Wednesday, how I accidentally discovered that Geralt is a Ken doll. Mm-hmm. There's nothing down there. As I was messing around with console commands in The Witcher 3, he accidentally wound up with no clothing, and there's nothing there. Not so in this game. Nope. Basically, you can customize everything with a great amount of detail, and when I say everything, I mean everything.
Everything. So you can go to the grocer and you can be like, "Hey, we need extra large tomatoes on this," or you can say, "You know what? I'm just going to take the eggplant and no tomatoes, but also throw in a clam." I mean, you can do any combination here apparently. So yeah, that's gonna be fun.
Right.
Also, kind of called this out a couple months ago. Just wanted everybody to know that. So, yeah, we're trying not to get killed by the censor here. We're stretching it really hard, guys.
Sorry, just trying to collect my thoughts because this. Okay. So anyway, that's the situation. Then of course they talk about the state-altering inhalers and stimulants, and there's depictions of drug use, all that. There's swearing. So yes, it got a very, very mature rating. But anyway, there's some interesting details in there. So yes, character customization. We've got more details on that now. We know what the romance scenes are going to be like. For the most part, like very, very soft core stuff, but about Witcher 3 level. Yeah, and then there's something called the Night City Wire happening on June 11th, and this was announced by Cyberpunk 2077 Twitter account, and
we forgot to mention there is a separate slider for the back buns as well. Just thought I'd throw that in there because I read it on Twitter, and if I read it on Twitter, you all have to hear about it now too. So, yeah.
That's how it works.
Throw that out there. I've had a great mental imagination over the last few days. It's been great.
All right. So
yes.
Anyway,
June 11th.
And one of the CD Projekt reps replied to that or retweeted it saying, "Stuff will be shown." Mm-hmm. So there's gonna be something. So still, over a month away, but we're going to be seeing more stuff. Finally, when you think about the fact that the game was supposed to be out already, it's kind of like, yes, please give us something already. Oh, and then I wanted to talk about this in-game purchase things. So, according to ESRB's website, if it's labeled with the tag that says in-game purchases, it means that the game contains in-game offers to purchase digital goods or premiums with real-world currency, including but not limited to bonus levels, skins, music, virtual coins, and other forms of in-game currency, subscriptions, season passes, and upgrades. Example, where you can pay to upgrade an app game to disable ads on it. That's an in-game purchase. Buying skins and stuff for your characters, in-game purchases. Now, it's not loot box in-game purchases because that has the in-game purchase tag that says includes random items. The Cyberpunk 2077 rating does not have the include random items sort of sub indicator, but it does have the in-game purchases thing. So that surprised me. So I thought this game was not going to be having microtransactions. Cyb, do you have any thoughts and input on this?
So again, we need to clarify. CDPR usually puts out content for the game in the form of downloadable content and stuff like that. Because of the way that the industry has changed, and because of the way that certain things are reflected in how other things are made, and I know that's so very helpful is trying to figure out how that works out. What you end up having is this where they've got if they have any additional content at all, that's going to be available to purchase, like say an independent soundtrack or other little goodies, then they're going to be forced to throw in that term, downloadable microtransactions. Yes, this
could apply to just DLC, or like
this can apply
a link to buying the soundtrack from in the game, that kind of a thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not really clear.
If they have a connection or a link to their store, to their clothing store, their clothing line, that may include this as well. But really, the big thing to focus on is that how it's worded in comparison to other games that have more like DLC and that kind of thing, or more like paid microtransactions for a bunch of other stuff. So again, people need to not freak out because they've made it quite clear that they're not going to go this way. And we know this for sure, that it's not going to be any kind of randomized stuff, but the digital content includes game soundtrack, art book, wallpapers, and Cyberpunk 2020 source book. These are what is in the digital content for some versions of this game, which means that for other versions of this game, there's a chance that that stuff may not necessarily be included, but might be a purchasable add-on. Again, digital content includes game soundtrack, art book, 2020 source book, and wallpapers for desktop and mobile. Those things may be considered microtransactions. So we have to bear that in mind before anybody gets all upset about microtransactions, and we may end up having to do another video on this just because it's kind of an important thing. So but yeah, this is most likely what that's including. We know that it's not including is that there's no randomized chance, because that is not in the drop list for any of this stuff. So and we don't know how much of their content is going to be how much they will have that is additional, like DLCs and micro DLCs and stuff like that. Like we may end up seeing a lot of themed packages dropping for V down the road, like various outfit themes for various gangs and stuff like that. So that is something that may or may not necessarily pop up. So again,
Somnolence, yes, and Somnolence just point out in the chat here that the CDPR was asked about this, and there was a link in our Cyberpunk channel on the Discord. I found that it links to a German article, which I can't read, so I'm going to have to get this translated, unless somebody might have translated it in the chat here for us. So, okay, we're looking into this, but I just want to shout out Brotech. Thank you so much for the super chat. He says, CDPR, king of innovation and customization. Heart, can we just appreciate? Well, we definitely do. We definitely do.
I think this is hilarious. This is going to be, this is seriously going to push the boundaries of all future games, where it's like, can you imagine next year at the GDC or at any kind of like big major event, and somebody's announcing a new big RPG game? Sir, will we have customizable tomatoes and or clams? I cannot wait for that conversation to happen in a big presser. That's just going to be hilarious.
Okay, we got confirmation from the Cyberpunk 2077 Twitter feed here. Cyberpunk 2077 is a single-player game with no microtransactions. The ESRB info is based on the fact that expansions require the base game and are therefore treated as a purchase by the rating board.
Yeah.
Okay. They should have
Yeah.
They should not just lump that in with in-game purchases. That's ridiculous.
Are
but
you
anyway,
kidding me? Are you kidding me? Do you know how many companies that rely on goading people into buying their game, thinking that there is no microtransactions, that they'll just be big DLCs and expansions that you can buy, and then as soon as you buy it for your 15-year-old kid, you turn around, he spent $500 on the game because he just had to get that purple skin.
I guess, yeah, there could be that. There could be that kind of a loophole, I suppose. James Thomas, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate that. No comment with that one, but thanks for enjoying the show and being here with us. Yeah. So yeah, no, you have a point. They would just start calling it expansions, but it feels like that
because it's a word game. It's a word.
It's an external like there's an in-game.
No, I get you. It's really annoying.
It's
really
buying an outside part of. It's not buying pieces for the game that you're currently playing. You're buying like an expansion pack. That should be specified separately. But
yeah, but I mean, EA, Activision, they're gonna find a way to.
Yeah, they'll find loopholes. Yeah, no, I mean that's a very fair point. All right, well, thank you, Somnolence and others in the chat for letting us know about those responses from CDPR. There, hadn't seen those before. I think that's about all. I'm curious about. Okay, we kind of skimmed over this. I'm very curious about this Night City Wire thing that's happening June 11th, where stuff will be shown. I'm wondering if this is part of Jeff Keighley's Summer Games Fest. We know that CD Projekt was on board for that, so I don't know if this is part of that or if this is a separate thing. But June 11th, mark your calendars. That is my calendar would work for me. That's a Thursday, June 11th. Oh, darn. So that's like the day after our normal podcast, but we'll probably, if there's anything exciting or super awesome happening, we'll do a special stream for it or do a response stream or put out videos, whatever. Somewhat tangentially related to Cyberpunk, Elon Musk and Grimes just had a baby. So Grimes, as many of you know, she is doing a lot of the music for Cyberpunk 2077. There's a lot of coverage about her involvement in the game. So her baby with Elon Musk was just born, and we're just bringing this up as kind of a funny story because the name of the child is going to appear on your screens right now if you're watching on YouTube. That is what is the child's name according to Grimes and Elon. Now, I don't know if they're just trolling us. I don't know if this could actually be a legal name where they live.
I thought that numbers were not allowed. I know that you cannot change your name to a number. That is not allowed. Yeah, I know that you in some places you can't use actual numbers. Now, I mean, this is going to be really funny if this just turns out to be an album and or a new model Tesla.
That's
going to be really funny if that happens. Like Elon brings his child out onto a stage and he's like, "Hey, I just wanted to show off my kid. I'm gonna put him up here on the pedestal," and bang! It turns into a car. It's like, yeah, this is my baby.
Yeah.
Right? Get it? Because never mind.
Grimes did tweet out an explanation of this name. So the X is the unknown variable. The symbol next to it, the A, like the one that looks like an A smashed together with an E, that it's called an ash, interestingly enough. I've got a new way to spell my name now. But now it's apparently pronounced as in like cat, but we don't use it much anymore. But according to Grimes, it's the Elven spelling of the word I, A-I, Elven, the Elven spelling of AI. And A-12 refers to a type of aircraft known as the Archangel. And it's like, or she says in her tweet, A-12 is the precursor to the SR-17, our favorite aircraft. Plus A equals Archangel, my favorite song. The A-12 is also referred to as the Archangel. So it's... Anyway, all this to show that celebrities are totally normal people who do not succumb to insanity at all. All right. Anyway, I'm not convinced that they're not trolling us. Polly's 911. Thank you so much for the super chat. Do you think the 2077 maturity... sorry, let me read that again. Do you think 2077 maturity is going to set new game rating regulation standards? I'm pretty sure there will be more than one offended Karen after her kid buys 2077, because it's never a parent's fault that their kid gets an 18-plus game. You know, if Grand Theft Auto didn't do it, I doubt that Cyberpunk's going to do it. There will be complaints, and there will be... there may be people who get up in arms about it. But, personally, I don't think... this is not the only... This is one of the most high-profile, very mature games out there, but, I mean, The Witcher 3 was hugely popular. Grand Theft Auto is a hugely popular series. There are other games that push the limits. There may be an important discussion that happens there about parental responsibility versus the, ratings board. I mean, they've got a ratings board that goes into incredible detail. If parents are going to be lazy, that's not the game developer or publisher's fault. And I think most reasonable people recognize that. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for all of the generous super chats today. Really, really appreciate that. All right, and then we've got a couple of updates on some other stories. By the way, you're listening to the Augmented Reality Podcast. Love seeing everybody so active in the live chat. If you want to keep the conversation going after the live broadcast, we welcome you to join our Discord community. You can find the link in the description below. It's a place where you can chat with us and other Triple S community members about the things we love to talk about. Stay up to date about everything we're doing here at the Triple S League. Click the link below to join. Be sure to say hi to us in the welcome channel. So, a couple of updates on some stories that we have previously covered. Sony can eat a bag of dongs. That's the headline of this one.
Eggplant?
Dongles. Sorry, I mispronounced dongles. Yeah, they can eat a big steaming eggplant salad. So, on Saturday, we discussed the situation about Sony abusing their YouTube's copyright system and also just DMCA law in general. They started just going after the people who were leaking the actual footage of the game that was released. And then they dropped some info that they had discovered who the leakers were, and it wasn't anyone who worked for Sony or Naughty Dog. Which, I don't know if I believe them at this point, but quite frankly, at this point, personally, I don't care who the leakers were. The fact is, the leaks got out, people reacted negatively, almost universally, across the board and across all political viewpoints. People were like, this sucks. So what happens? Sony starts going after not only people who are actually using the footage, but anyone who's talking about it. And even if they're not using any of the copyrighted imagery or video or anything from what was leaked, they were abusing copyright to silence critique of their game, is the ultimate breakdown of what was happening. We self-censored on Saturday talking about this because it was a fresh story and we were nervous about getting a copyright strike ourselves, because even an unjustified copyright strike could very negatively damage our channel. But I'm done with worrying about that. they're in the wrong. They are, even YouTube, who is notorious for doing the absolute bare minimum to support its creators in these types of situations. Even YouTube is stepping in and saying, no, guys, your copyright strikes on these channels are not valid. So, Heels versus Babyface, the copyright strike on his channel was reversed by YouTube, which we're happy to report. Again, it's not about whether or not you like his content or not. It's about how the copyright tool is being used and abused. He still has copyright claims on his video, so the video in question is still not visible to the world, but the strike has been removed. So that's a step in the right direction. And yeah, YouTube basically was like, yeah, this is not a legal copyright takedown because you've left out the information, because this third-party company that Sony was using to copyright strike channels on their behalf were claiming entire videos that, entire videos. Like someone's sitting there talking about it to their webcam for 12 minutes, and they'd claim the entire video, even if there's no imagery in it. But even if there was some sort of copyrighted info or copyrighted material in the video, if you're doing a DMCA takedown, you have to specify exactly which part falls under your copyright, and you have to indicate that with time codes and stuff. They didn't do that. They just claimed the entire video in the case of Heel versus Babyface, and also with others who there was one channel that got struck for talking about the fact that other channels were getting struck down. Mm-hmm. So Sony's on the warpath with all of this, but thankfully it looks like they're losing. They don't have a legal leg to stand on, but they're going down like a thrashing deer underneath a cop car. Like that tie-in. That was probably a poor choice. But anyway, in this case, they're trying to be the cop running over the deer, but the deer's getting back up and is going to kick him in the face. Because this is ridiculous. I mean, it's clear and illegal abuse of the copyright system. Unfortunately, despite the fact that they're giving out spurious copyright claims, there's no penalty to the people doing the claims. There's a penalty to us as YouTubers. If we get a claim and we dispute it falsely, we can get punished for that. But someone who gives a false claim there's literally no retribution for people who do that. It's absurd how the system is set up. But anyway, some good news on that front. And meanwhile, Sony and Naughty Dog and whoever is involved in this, they're just killing their reputations with this behavior. I mean, they're clearly kind of throwing a temper tantrum because people didn't like what they saw in the leak. Funky Moin says, that's what I said in the Discord. Copyright owners should have a 3 false claim strikeout. Well, I agree. If we can get 3 copyright strikes and our channel goes away, that should be the same for claimants. And if you're claiming things falsely, then absolutely there should be a penalty for that. You just shouldn't be allowed to get away with that. I mean, it's one thing to make a mistake, but when it's clearly intentional, then and it clearly is. So anyway. And if they strike us for talking about this in this video, we'll just join in the fight. So,
and I mean, we do see, this is a 2-road street, and unfortunately, you've got this situation with some other YouTubers that are being very aggressive with claiming and trying to shut down people who are talking about them at all, and they're making ridiculous things because they're selling full episodes of anime through their Patreon, and it's like, you can't do that. That's not yours. Like, you could sell a track of you reacting to an episode or an entire series, but you can't include the full uncut footage from the entire anime. Like, come on, that's ridiculous. I mean, and this really comes down to, they should have sat down a lot of people all at the same time and said, let's hammer out a deal. Let's sit down, find out what bunch of these big companies want, bunch of these little companies want. They have to understand that this is the new culture, this is the new normal. So no, they're not going to be able to like say you can't use any of our stuff. We have to have some room for fair use, but at the same time, it's like let's come up with some accurate rules, and then let's have everybody stick to them as much as possible. And the only time that you kind of move outside of that is when somebody's clearly, abusing the system, or is creating a problem for the sake of creating problems, or profiting off of problems. It's like we get that there's two sides to this.
Well, yeah, like, and you need to be protected from your stuff blatantly being stolen and used in for profiteering ways.
Rick and Morty had one of the funniest lines on it in this latest episode that I've ever seen. One of the funniest episodes I've seen in a really long time, where Rick turns to Morty and he's like, Morty, I don't want to hear it from you. You watch YouTube videos of people reacting to other people reacting to watching YouTube videos. It's like that's the full like circle of insanity. Is like, oh no, I don't like watching YouTube videos. I like watching people who watch YouTube videos of people watching YouTube videos and reacting to the full circle of that reaction sphere going on. And it's like, oh, it was so funny. Plus, like a really, I think it's really cool how they ended that, with them converting, and doing that. I think that's, I think we're going to see a new Rick and Morty now that they're happy with that decision. So, yeah, for those of you who watched it, you know what I'm talking about. It was lots of good fun. I thought their jokes were pretty on point. Yeah. So, anyways,
I haven't been watching the new season yet. I don't even know where.
Yeah,
to watch
well, I mean, it only came out for most people, it only came out yesterday. So
for what Time Bean's pointing out here, you can't copyright people talking about things. No, I mean exactly. I can talk about.
Can never do that.
You can't copyright an idea. You copyright the execution of an idea in artistic format. I mean, I think there's definitely some blatant, like if you copy the story point for point, even if you change the wording, yes, that's still copyright infringement. I don't know the legal technicalities. You can't even copyright a title. I don't know if you're aware with this. Book titles are not copyrighted.
It's somebody I've been doing a lot of research on this for my book stuff coming up, and there was somebody who got in big trouble because she tried to copyright a word, and then any other book that had that same word in the title, she went after them personally and sued them directly and it was like, I started to get the impression that she wasn't suing because she had a genuine worry about her thing. It was more like, hey, I'm suing you for like $150,000 because you used a word that I have copyrighted in your title, and I have that copyrighted. You're not allowed to do that, but I'm willing to settle for $2,000.
Yeah,
so it really came. It was a shakedown. I was like, well, I can make your life miserable for the next few years, or you just pay me now and we just settle out of court.
Yeah.
And I'll allow you to use this word. It's like there are scumbags that come up with every possible way to use and abuse all of these systems.
And the sad thing is, like, so many people just do not understand copyright. Like, there should almost be a basic class in it in school. You can't take a photo that somebody else took with their camera, make a tiny change to it, and then release it as your own. Like, there are some people that think you can, as long as you change some little thing about it, then, it's no longer subject to copyright. No, that's a derivative work. That's still under the original copyright. But anyway, we're going to... we don't need to go into a whole diatribe about that. But yeah, Time Being, copywriting words is a way to censor free speech. Absolutely. I mean, if they absolutely... you can't control... You can't own words. You can't own ideas. You can own a creation, but Anyway, it's very technical, but Brotech, thank you for this. Another super chat. Thank you so much. Sony is using brute force tactic. They don't care about arguments of copyright. They thought they can intimidate by threatening livelihoods. Oopsie. Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. They're not. This is not. They know. They know this isn't legitimate copyright. A legitimate copyright claim. They know that. They're trying to intimidate. This is their version of Take-Two sending in the thugs to Supmato's house. Mm-hmm. And I don't like where this is going, where we're seeing these large corporations using these kinds of tactics. We've got to stand up against this and say, no, this is ridiculous. Yeah. This is absurd. And you're not going to get away with bullying us on this.
I just want to one of the other things that I think we should point out here, which you briefly touched on, is that they're coming out saying, oh no, it wasn't an employee, it was this old thing. And so now people have been looking into this. My first thought when I heard this immediately was like, that's a load of horse manure. Like that is a big old load of horse manure there. And I still do, and I still kind of think that for the most part, I still very much believe that is, I don't doubt that there was an opening. Most companies have an opening in their system somewhere. Most people do experience hacks on a fairly regular basis by very intelligent, very, sometimes white hat, sometimes black hat, sometimes they're out for profit, sometimes they're just doing it because they can. And there's of course some problems with that, which is why you need to hire good security and especially if you're a big multi-million-dollar company, it's like you can afford to hire a team of people that's main job is to keep you safe. Job safety, I think, is one of those few things that it really isn't respected as much as it should be. So, but when it comes down to this, Bellular and a couple of the YouTubers were looking at this, really, really digging deep on it, and I have to concur with most of them. Is right now we can look at this and we say, yeah, I don't know if this is true. Like it really doesn't. The evidence that they put forward and the stuff, it's like, you could just have made that up.
Because the story that they're putting out is a little sketchy because they're claiming that it was a hack. They're claiming somebody hacked into their servers using an exploit in another game, if I recall correctly. I don't have the info in front of me, but they're claiming that someone hacked into their servers and stole a build of the game.
Yeah, they basically stole a build that was being shown to one of the lead devs. They were just going through some stuff and they managed to copy a bunch of this stuff.
That seems because they stole a build. I mean, that would mean that more leaks could come out because someone's got this build.
They stole a recording of a build. Is kind of what they're going with. They didn't steal the whole thing.
Oh, okay. Because
they basically were able to get into the system where somebody was playing it, basically streaming it with mod tools going on up on the screen at the same time, and that they were just meandering through, and they were taking that essentially and just transporting it over to a bunch of other stuff. Not transporting it, showcasing it to one of the lead devs who was commenting and checking things out, and this is where they basically slipped into the back seat, were able to catch this footage and whatnot. Now that's what they're saying. And again, people have really dug deep down into this. They have really looked into the nitty gritty details on this. Is it possible? Yes, but a little unlikely.
Seems far-fetched.
It seems so. The question you have to really come down to is cui bono. Cui bono is probably one of the most. It will answer almost every question in life. It really, really will. And for those of you who don't know, it means who profits. So, who profits if it's a leak from the from one of their team members, right? It was an inside leak, somebody who's upset about the pay scale. What would Sony get out of that? What would Naughty Dog get out of that?
Well, that hurts them, especially coming right on the heels of the reporting about how horrible their working conditions are.
And what would they profit from exposing this person, then taking them to court and suing them for everything they had? Well, they already know how much that would profit them, because they're the ones who have been paying them crap wages for the last few years, which would be not very much. In fact, most of these people, and I know a lot of developers who are in the early years of the industry and they're just out of university, these people have nothing. A lot of these people, there's a lot of developers over at Blizzard who their grand total wealth of what they have, what they've been able to put together, not counting inheritance stuff, their grand total wealth is sitting at probably around negative $150,000 because of student loans. Suing that person is going to get you a big fat zero, because you're the one who's been paying them crap wages for the last few years and have been ignoring their basic needs and have been saying, oh no, well, it's because it's a dream job. You get to work here. It's a dream job after all. Or we're going to pay you when the project's done. We're going to give you a huge bonus. It's going to be amazing. Amazing. Did you hear that time where somebody got this big bonus and they were able to buy a house with that bonus? Yeah, that's what we're going to do with you, man. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. You just got to stick around and do the work, do the weight, pull your weight, pull the thing. And in some cases that system works and is fair for some people, but in other cases, I'm not going to say in this case in particular because that would be speculative, but in many other cases, it's not. It's just being used. And you're using and abusing the people that are below you, and they know that. So when this stuff leaks, it doesn't behoove them to do that. What they'll do is they'll put you on a blacklist and they'll kick you out of the company. And because right now, if they say, oh no, we're victims by a hacker who did this for profit, right away you're going to have people go, oh well, that's terrible. All right, I'm on your side. Immediately puts you in the place of like, oh, this whole thing was spoiled not because of an ideological reason on standing up for proper payment of people working on these games and working conditions. Instead, it was just some hacker. And everything's actually beautiful and fine, and there's flowers blooming and there's little deer and rabbits bouncing through the development studio because everything's just perfect there. Oh, now I feel outraged. And really, the whole time it's just them sitting back going, all right, what's the best way to handle this? Because again, I've been in these rooms before. Big problem. How do we get out of this problem without looking bad? First question from the CEO. How do we fix this so that we continue to make money tomorrow? Sometimes it's, well, we can tell them the truth. Other times, some other person in the room says, well, we could just create a lie. I mean, the truth is just not good. They don't deserve the truth anyways. We'll just create a narrative that says something that we want to say.
Yeah. No, very true. I mean, this could be a CYA moment of them just trying to change the narrative in their favor. Oh, we got hacked. Although I feel like that makes them look really stupid. If there's this, if you can utilize an exploit in a different game to gain access to a server that has a build of your game or some other internal, whether it's a video or whatever, internal information within the company that's not supposed to get out. Something's wrong with your system.
Yeah, and again, there's lots of ways that you can do this. A lot of companies are working this way right now. Brotech, thanks for the super chat once again. Are game developers growing on trees in America, he asks. Why are they letting these companies exploit them like that? I don't get it. Skill should be rewarded. So just kind of quickly to touch on this, because Brotech, you're 100% right here. So, and this is a really spot on question. So the answer is yes and no. Game developers are growing on trees. Good developers are not growing on trees. Moderate, mid-range developers who you just want them to work on a general asset or something like that, they can do that. You know, you can find an unending number of people over on the which I was perusing just a few minutes ago, before the podcast, over on the Nexus mods. You can find a whole lot of people who can do a whole lot of really good work, and who can muddle through some mod artwork and or who can work on some small stuff in their free time. And it really is very there's a big number of people who can do this kind of stuff. Great developers who can create something that's truly unique, different, who has the ability to bring to life a concept, an idea that's in the lead developer, or like, the game world creator's mind. Those people are few and far between, and those people are hard to find, hard to get, and even harder to hold on to. And what ends up happening is that a lot of these companies will chew through those middle to low ranking people, because they can say, hey, do you want to work for us for free? Because in some cases people will do that. I know that there's a lot of, back in the day when a lot of this Q&A testing had to be done in-house, it was friends and family. And in order to get into with some of these companies, people would say, hey, I want to get into the Q&A team so that I can play these games before they're released, and I can work on this because I want to get into the games industry. I want to make video games. And they're like, well, right now we're full up on paid people, and the paid people are being paid minimum wage. And they have to like pull in like 30, 40 hours a week, like, or 50 hours a week, but all on minimum wage. It was really crazy. And people lined up to say, you know what, I'll do it for free. And by the way, this is a good way to get a job. It really is. If you're skilled at something, you show up, say you're really good at anything, right? Say that you have a real passion for lawn care, and you show up at a guy's business, and you're like, hey, it's going to be a tight summer, I know. Look, I don't have a job right now. I'm willing to work for you for free for the next like couple of weeks, and I can guarantee that I'll be here for this amount of weeks. So the guy would go, okay, well, sure. I mean, you want to work for us for free? Sure, fine, whatever. And then you blow his like mind as far as like him expecting you to be able to do X amount, and you end up doing triple that. And then you're like, hey, you come back after a week and you be like, hey, I have another job offer, so I probably won't be able to hang around. The guy will say, well, what if I did pay you, and what if, like, what's this new job you're getting? Oh, well, it was going to be like this amount of wage. And you're like, well, I'll pay you a little bit more than that, because now you've proven your worth. So just in general, that's a good way to, I know, a little off topic, but that's how a lot of these game developers worked. And that's how a lot of QA testing worked in these companies. And I mean, I've been there and done that. That's kind of how I first got involved in the thing many, 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 many years ago. And you work your way up from there, proving that you can be of worth. So skill is rewarded, or used to be rewarded, but because now you have a lot of these university programs that are pumping degrees out. And I don't know if you know this, but not everybody who goes through a college and gets a degree actually knows how to do their job. I mean, in some cases, I'm shocked at people who get through college. I believe in the States there's this big old grand conspiracy, not conspiracy. Ash, what's the my brain's farting. What's the what the college application scandal? Right, that's what it was. So this college application scandal of people getting into college that it's not even like they didn't have the SAT score to get into a community college, let alone like these big Ivy Leagues. And they spent more of their time there partying than they did learning whatever that they were doing. But they'll get hired based off of that. There's a lot more of that going on. So unfortunately, there's a much bigger drop in actual skill and people actually like showing up that actually know what they're doing. There's a lot less of that.
Yeah. And having those credentials, that doesn't mean you're a hard worker, doesn't mean you're creative, doesn't mean you have initiative. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of factors to consider, and yeah, eventually when we get to the point of, hopefully, some point in the future, hiring people here at the Triple S League, I'm going to be looking for those things. It's like, okay, did you go to school? That's cool, but can you do the job? Can you take initiative? Can you be creative? Can you put your heart and soul into creating things? That's what we want to know around here.
Ash and I, you trained in more or less the same kind of field for the most part.
Yeah.
It was a tech-oriented field. I went to my graduate studies mostly focused around like history and psychology. I mean, you took a fair bit of psychology as well, and I mean that
early on, my early adult education was all in psychology, but then I decided I didn't want to do that. I decided I wanted to make stuff with my computer. So here we are. Anyway, we should move on because we got one more topic to get to here.
Big thanks again to Game.
Oh yeah,
Notes
Game Notes with
another
super chat.
While I was answering the other one, but yeah, great question, because we are seeing an influx of developers and developers worldwide for sure. Now, whether or not how this will pan out in the future, because this has harmed Naughty Dog permanently. Like, they will not be able to hire people after this game goes live. Like, they already can't hire people because everybody says stay away from Naughty Dog. And Naughty Dog, they're going to have to retool the entire studio. So they're going to have to fire whoever's in charge. They'll probably have to fire a couple of the team leads too, or give them a bonus to tell them to walk or find a new thing or something like that. And then they will have to come forward. They'll have to go on a big recruiting spree, hire a new big name to take over the new direction of a couple things, and then hire a bunch of new team leads, and then say, hey, we have new team leads, we have new people, and we have a new guarantee on wages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the only way that they're going to be able to recover from their horrendous reputation in the industry right now, where most people are not even considering applying to Naughty Dog, let alone taking a position there. So
yeah,
if
their reputation in the industry is going to be, even if the reputation among consumers, and this is something I believe it was being mentioned earlier.
They might be able to get away with this because there is always the pirate faction, and the pirate faction is the people who they're like, yar, they show up, they work for scrap for the promise of a big bounty, and they will burn themselves out and everybody else around them whilst trying to do that. I used to work with a ton of people like this, where they come in, they work like a dog for basically nothing for the promise of a giant haul at the end. And in a lot of cases, this does work, and this does work. The worse the generalized economy is, the more this kind of like behavior will show up. Could they make another game with just hiring basically a whole bunch of scurvy pirate type, again, when it came to, work personality? Yeah, they might be able to pull that off. They might, but you need the leadership in order to do that. I've never known any pirates that have succeeded when they have a bad leader. And right now I'm convinced that Naughty Dog is one of the worst leaders I could possibly imagine. He is inept in every possible way, and I don't say that gleefully. I say that very depressed and sadly, because unfortunately that's just the way some people operate, and he clearly operates on that concept of I don't care. Like, people are here to do what I tell them to do, and I don't care about your feedback, and I certainly don't care about your concept on whether or not I'm doing a good job. So yeah.
All right. One final story. We're not going to go too long on this one, but it's an update to something we talked about recently, the Doom Eternal soundtrack. A bit of a controversy around that. So when the Doom Eternal soundtrack was released, people were pointing out, wow, this is very badly mixed. And then Mick Gordon said some things that indicated that he was not directly involved with a lot of the mixing on the soundtrack, and that it's unlikely he was going to work with id Software again on any of their future titles, which was disappointing for a lot of people because his music has been almost synonymous with some id Software titles, especially the Doom series. So, like the really hard rock music that you get when you're playing Doom, that's all Mick Gordon. So it was sounding like maybe id or Bethesda had screwed him over, but the other side of the story is starting to come out. And Marty Stratton, the executive producer of the game, has published an open letter on Reddit explaining the situation in great detail. There's, it's very, very long. But basically the summary is that he's claiming that Gordon was missing deadlines, and basically his, what he had reported wasn't entirely accurate. It sounds like so Mick was brought on to mix and master the soundtrack. He had a deadline to meet, and then he asked for like a 4-week extension at some point, which it gave to him. They actually gave him a 6-week extension, and they moved his on-time completion bonus too. So, like, if he hit the new deadline, he'd still get his on-time delivery bonus for the job. So that was, if that's true, that sounds pretty generous. It resulted in a delay in the release of the soundtrack, but basically, they were up against a hard deadline, which apparently Mick Gordon had missed that deadline, and they had somebody within the studio working on mixing the tracks as a backup just in case, and most of those are what's on the OST, because they just had to get it out, right? I believe that there are some tracks on the OST that were mixed by Gordon. He pointed that out in one of his messages, that if you look at this track and this track, those are the ones I mixed. But anyway, it's a fairly complicated situation, and the open letter from
now he wouldn't come out and say this stuff if they couldn't back this stuff up with emails that he's clearly like indicated exist, and so I would believe them, because if none of this stuff could be backed up, for sure 100% I would expect him to be able to sue them for defamation, because they're saying, oh no, this happened, and he would be able to prove that didn't necessarily exist. As it stands, it sounds like to me that this artist, which again, art is a fickle thing, I think he simply couldn't get it done on time. He probably hit some creative walls, which happen. I mean, that happens. It's rough, but he made the promise over and over and over and over again that, oh no, they would be able to get it out by, he would get it to them by a certain time, even when they were up against the clock, and they had kind of like this like last minute timeline, and he couldn't make that, and so they had to bring in some people to like quickly work on what he had given them, and it then kind of failed, and then he kind of like sat back and said, well, it's really just it. He kind of alluded that it was their fault, and that and that stuff. It sounds to me, from having kind of dug into this, that he expected them to be able to just delay the game while he finished the music, and he would get the music to them when he was ready to get the music to them. Try explaining that to your fans, right? Who's expecting a game that's already been delayed once. And again, he had no problem with the previous soundtrack, getting that out on a timely manner. So you would expect him not to have the same, you would expect that he would be capable of doing it again. But Again, I don't think it's necessarily his fault. I mean, this is pretty standard as far as artists go, honestly. Working with a lot of artists, some of them do have, creative challenges that they face. I have creative challenges that I face when I'm doing stuff, and sometimes you're like, well, I need to write a chapter today, or I need to compose a new song today, and you can sit there, throwing piles and piles and piles of balled up paper onto the ground till you're covered in a 3 foot pile of them, and you still don't have any good ideas that work. And so I understand that, I get that, and I feel kind of bad for the guy. I feel kind of bad for everybody involved in this.
No, it's definitely like it's unfortunate because they've now said, like, it has now said that they're not going to be working with Mick Gordon going forward, not even on the Doom Eternal DLC. And yes, Funky, he meant delaying the OST. And the thing about it is, like, it probably had, if they're working with a record label on this, they probably did have a deadline from, like, the soundtrack distributor or whoever. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces, and eventually, like, the thing has just got to get done. It's got to get out the door. So I mean, I feel like it's still, to release a badly mixed soundtrack, like, I still feel like they should have gotten a professional in to do it properly.
I think they ran out of time.
Well, I mean, that could be, but they had somebody in their office working on these tracks at the same time Mick Gordon was doing the mix. It was in case.
Not until like the last phase. And I mean, he might have had a half a dozen different jobs, right?
Right. He was like, I believe, let me see, I just read it somewhere here. Okay, I can't find it now, but he was like one of the sound designers or lead designers on the sound designer on the game. So he knew something.
He's working on other stuff. Like, he probably had a list of other things to do. And I mean, they're not massive, right? They can't just snap their fingers and say, we need a new soundtrack by tomorrow afternoon, get it done. I don't think they can do that. There's not very many studios that could do that. I don't even know if EA and Activision could pull that off. They probably might be able to, but I kind of doubt it. So this is one of these situations where, unfortunately, I think it sucks.
Yeah,
I don't.
It sucks. Solution. It really. It's one of these things where it's like, yeah, this is unfortunate that this is happening. Unfortunately, it happens sometimes when you're working with artists. They are notoriously. How can I say? And I'm talking about myself in this whole group. Creative types are notoriously. Can be difficult to work with. Let's just put it that way. Okay, Paulie's 911. Thank you so much for another super chat. You are wonderful. You are all wonderful today. I do not feel worthy of the generosity. But Paulie says,
especially when we're talking about issues that are a little.
I feel like this podcast got off to a rough start, but we really appreciate you all being here, slamming the like button, giving the super chats, being involved in the chat. Really appreciate it. Paulie says, I think Naughty Dog is done for unless Last of Us 2 somehow sells extremely well even after this huge fiasco. Waits for Sony to execute Naughty Dog. Well, Sony's not EA, so I don't know.
I think Sony. I think you're right. I think Sony will try and recover the studio basically by rebooting it. Because at this point, that's your only option. If the game sells very poorly and reviews in the extreme negative, there's no way you can have this guy run the company anymore. Not the creative aspect of the company. He's got to go. Because the whole time he was very argumentative. And as far as we know, this is not going to be some like... This ending isn't going to make you sit down, drink coffee, and go, I just want to think about that ending. I really want to soak it all in. It's not. That's not going to happen. What he's done is he's created a narrative that we've seen 100 times before, done in 100 different ways. That seems more reminiscent of the last season of Game of Thrones than it does an actual new creative work. I mean, I'm serious. It, to me, I mean, I talked about how it's disturbing, how he's doing some of this violence and the way that he's focusing in on the violence. It really speaks to a troubled mind. But on the creative side, that story is just stupid. Like, it's been done 100 times. It's like trying to come up with a heist movie going, and at the end we will show that the plan fell apart, but that was actually part of the plan because the real plan was that it was already stolen.
That's never been done, yeah.
Yeah, that's never been done before. I haven't seen, I don't know, every single heist movie I've ever done where it turns out that at the last second that they didn't actually get the thing, but then, it turns out that was actually part of their plan, and the plan actually was to make everybody think that their plan actually wasn't going to work right before they got it to work. Ha ha! It's like, no, dude, that's been done a lot, and it's kind of old, and it's just bad. And that's really where that's where Naughty Dog is right now. Is Naughty Dog has fallen apart narratively, creatively, teamwork. There's no team there anymore. The team is shattered beyond all recognition. What they need to do is they need to basically fire most of the people that are in the top. Well, not fire them, but like fire the one. Like, Neil's got to go. Neil has to go. But then they can go through the list, find out who had problems, talk to everybody who's left in the last 3 years, said what was the issues, really sort through it, get rid of all the bad apples, get in a whole bunch of brand new people, start out with a new IP and a new concept heading in a new direction, utilizing the skills and whatever left that they have, and then do a big recruiting push to try and get people in on the studio, promising them, I mean, you're going to have to give them really good wages for them to come in and to stick around. And I don't think that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I said a couple months ago, I did that video where I said, this is the last game that Naughty Dog will make. And I am, as far as like what we consider Naughty Dog right now, this is the last game that they will make, period. They're not going to make a third. It's not in the cards. They have failed this project. They failed the concept. They failed the fans. Again, not necessarily whether you agree or disagree with the story, but in the way that they handled their employees, in the way that they handled the any kind of outrage that ever came their way, the way that they handled all their problems and difficulties, and how the leader has the leadership there and at Sony has spat in the face of people complaining and people saying, hey, we don't like this. And the reaction hasn't been, well, can we negotiate? Can we talk about this? Can we discover what your issues are? Can we sit down and have a discussion on what you think would improve? No, it's none of that. And all too often we see company after company after company do this now, where it's like they made a big mistake, a horrendous mistake. First reaction, blame everybody else. Blame those YouTubers making those videos about being angry at stuff. It's like, or you could have some introspection, because not all of us are rage based, click tubers getting money off of angry people. Some of us are looking at an art form and saying you failed at this, and this was your job, and you failed at this miserably. And people who fail at their job miserably either need to take a very long vacation, come back and put their head on straight, or you're in the wrong industry and you need to go. Like, and I mean, I've met a lot of people in that. I work in a very sensitive job where people die if we screw up. And it's like, it's not just a little, it's not a small number of people. It's like a bad year, like thousands of people die. It's like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe if you're not cut out for this job, you shouldn't have this job. Just maybe.
All right.
Yeah.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up there. But just one final note here. There's a game that we talked about recently. The demo is out now. It's called Ghost Runner. Gonna be checking it out as soon as I can. I was hoping to play it before the podcast, but there was just no time. But yeah, it's a cyberpunk-themed Mirror's Edge style running game. It looks really awesome because it looks like it's got like Dishonored style combat. So gonna check that out as soon as I can. But I mean, if you want to, the demo is available on Steam right now, so you can check that out. This has been the Augmented Reality Podcast. Thank you so much, everybody, for all of the great conversation in the chat. Thank you for supporting the show, listening live or after the fact. Please do not forget to slam that like button before you leave. We really appreciate that. So does YouTube. It tells YouTube that you appreciate this content, and the like button likes it too. The like button likes it rough. So like the like button rough like. Special thanks to our Patreon supporters and our channel members who helped make this content possible. Our big dang heroes on Patreon, Josh, Robin, Time Bean, our 2 anonymous supporters. Our channel members, Mr. Padzernik, Jer Schultz, Game Notes, Night City Punk, and Terror K. And to all of you with the super chats today, thank you so much as well. We are not worthy. You are very generous. And we really, really appreciate it, especially now with ad revenues down. But anyway, if you are listening after the fact on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, or any of the other platforms this podcast goes to, don't forget you can join the live show on Wednesdays and Saturdays on YouTube. Interact with us and other listeners, be a part of the discussion. The Augmented Reality Podcast is a presentation of the Triple S League. Check out our YouTube channel for game guides, reviews, comedy, news updates, and tons more quality gaming content. My name is Ash. On behalf of Cyb, thank you all so much for listening. I will talk to you again very soon.